Does anyone have any questions right now? All right. So I want to go ahead and start by introducing our panelists. Chris Herndon has a Master of Public Health candidate at University of Texas. Naeem Turner Bandel, candidate of Carnegie, and I should have practiced this. Yeah, you can correct me. Help me out here.
Carnegie Mellon.
Thank you so much. University, I got that part right. Natalie, is it Bales?
Bales.
Bales, okay. Doctor of Medicine candidate at University of Vermont. And Tony Dunlap, Master of Science in Education candidate at University of Pennsylvania.
Okay, so the goal of today's panel that we're hoping to achieve today is to give students a glimpse into narratives and journeys as an out-of-state STEM graduate student, and to also show students how to navigate the application process and what it's like adjusting and acclimating to a program and just life out of state. So the structure and flow of this panel today is a little bit different than what you're used to. Each panelist has created an Ignite presentation, and there are 5-minute long presentations. They're roughly 20 slides or less, and they auto advance every 15 seconds. And they're full of just lots of photos that will be narrating what they're going to be talking about today in correlation to the goal for the panel today. So the order for the presentation today, we'll have each panelist present, and then they'll take 2 questions after the presentation. So our first panelist will be Chris, and then he'll take 2 questions after his presentation, and then we'll have Naeem present, and he'll take 2 questions. Then Natalie, 2 questions, Tony, 2 questions, and then we'll open up to questions for all the panelists, and then we'll do a quick session wrap up. So we're gonna be starting with Chris. He is a Master's of Public Health candidate at the University of Texas. Are you ready, Chris?
I am, yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna advance to the next slide.
All right. Hi, yeah, my name is Chris Herndon. And yes, I'm an out-of-state grad student. That's why we're here. These are just some photos of me, a little bit of professional, but a little more personal too. The middle one is from Meow Wolf, if any of you have ever been. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Fort Collins. I was there for 22 years of my life. My pronouns are they, them. And a couple of my favorite spots in Fort Collins are the Alley Cat and Horse. Some things I like to do. I enjoy being abducted by aliens. Just kidding. I just like road tripping, but I found that in Utah and it was too good to pass up. I've recently gotten into pickleball and I really enjoy playing the ukulele. So a little bit about my undergrad at CSU. So I was actually going down a therapy counselor sort of path in psychology. And that was, my original plan, doing a master's as well. I minored in English and religious studies as well. And I knew even then that substance use and addiction was something that I just thought was really important. And I knew that's where I wanted to go, but I guess I was kind of moving away from therapy. So I started to consider more like nonprofit oriented things, social work, but eventually my professor kind of pointed me in the direction of public health. And after reading about it and just kind of getting a better understanding of the goal and the mission of it, it really resonated for me a little bit more than I guess therapy had at first. So a little bit about my journey. Really, honestly, the hardest part was just balancing things because, even though I had done a lot of research, like I had been, researching probably for like a year before, just trying to balance being in a fraternity with school and also work was kind of a lot. And then also, of course, the GRE was very stressful. I'm sure some of the other people can relate, yeah. And then I guess just the psych department, unfortunately, I know there are some resources available for navigating the graduate process, but it was only so helpful, especially because I was moving out of psychology. But these are the 4 that I ended up applying to. So the UT Health School of Public Health, University of Illinois, SUNY at Albany, and then Colorado School of Public Health. So I did end up applying both out of state and in state. And I was very lucky. I was able to, or I was accepted into all 4 of those. I really carefully narrowed it down, I guess, from the get-go. I tried to avoid applying to a bunch of programs. So really the decision then came down to which of those 4. And honestly, the biggest thing for me was just finances, because I guess generously my parents did offer to help, but I wanted to still make it affordable. I did not want to necessarily pick somewhere that was going to be expensive. So that's why I ultimately settled on UT Health, because with the scholarship that I got, I actually was able to get in-state tuition. And let me tell you, in-state tuition in Texas, real good. Better, cheaper than Colorado, actually. And then also the cost of living in Houston is just a lot cheaper than Colorado. So professionally and academically, some of the kind of major differences for me, at least, this is the first time I've ever had like a real job of any sort, not hourly. I'm actually salaried as a GA. And also work-wise, it's a lot more project paper writing. And then personally, it's just been a huge journey of self-discovery, because this is the first time I've been away from my parents, actually, like basically ever, like for any length of time. And it's basically, I think, the reason I figured out that I'm non-binary. So, and then these are just some pictures of some of my friends. Some of them have graduated, unfortunately, but a couple of them are still around. I actually live with one of them. I get to see her still pretty frequently. And then just some other personal things. Do not love the lack of nature here. I should have expected that given that it's Houston. But on the plus side, food definitely is great. That gets talked up a lot, and with good reason. And the humidity has been really good for my skin, I will say. Have to take a moment to talk about COVID, because also I'm in public health, so obviously I have to talk about it. But just because, like it really has impacted my experience in grad school, doing school remotely for the past 7 months, like it's just been very challenging. So here are my 3 quick tips. 1, know your living situation, because when I got here, I kind of illegally lived in university housing for about 2 months, so not great. Do not be like me. 2, know your peeps, because honestly, I just don't think, especially right now with everything going on, like I would just be so not grounded, not safe at all without the support of all the people around me. So definitely find your group of people. And then lastly, just go out of your comfort zone, because if you're taking this opportunity to, go to a completely different place, like it's really worth it to explore and just, better understand yourself and push yourself. Yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you, Chris. And now we'll take 2 questions for Chris, and feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat box to ask your question. And if panelists have questions too, you're more than welcome to ask.
Oh, it looks like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one in the chat. My biggest adjustment. Ooh. I think honestly, just, and so I guess I'm also showing my age here a bit. I went straight from undergrad into grad school, but I guess for me, it's really just been like actually really having to like just live independently. because like I said, I guess I grew up in Fort Collins, and while I live away from my parents for the second 2 years of college, I still saw them a lot. And I still had that really close connection with them and a little bit more of that direct support. So I guess, yeah, I would say honestly the biggest adjustment is just actually adjusting to full proper adult life, taking care of yourself completely, paying for most things. Yeah, I would say that's probably been the biggest adjustment overall for me.
Any other questions for Chris?
Ooh, what do I enjoy most about Texas? Okay. I definitely say not the heat because, oh man, it really does stay hot for just so long. It really only started cooling off a little bit in the past 2 weeks. And yeah, coming from Colorado, that was a big shock. But what I enjoy most, I guess, I really I will say there is still kind of the Southern hospitality here in Houston, and I guess it's just nice because it's still. This is maybe more a little answering what do I like about Houston, but it kind of answers that question too. I just appreciate that it's both urban, but again, it still has that there is that sense of hospitality that I know can sometimes be lost in bigger cities. And so I guess that's the thing I would say I probably like most about Houston is just the fact that despite it being urban, it still has that southern kind of aspect to it. So, yeah.
Thank you for the great questions. Now we're going to move on to our next panelist presentation, which is Naeem. He is a PhD candidate in electrical engineering and computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon. Are you ready to start your presentation, Naeem?
I guess so.
Okay, awesome. I will move to your first slide.
Hi, I'm Naeem Turnbandeli. My pronouns are he, him, his. Currently, I'm a PhD candidate in electrical and computer engineering. I'm also a speaker, advocate, and two-time children's author, and I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. Throughout my life, I've sort of always had processes to help make my dreams a reality. So, for example, when I wanted to go to Brazil and try to play soccer professionally, I had a process. And when I wanted to be an engineer, I also had a process just to pursue that degree. And as I work to attain my doctorate degree, I still have a process. And I kind of believe anyone pursuing graduate school should have some sort of process for success, because the reality is navigating graduate school without one is kind of difficult, if not impossible. So in my brief 4 or so minutes left that I have, I'll share with you kind of what I think the graduate school journey requires, why it can be difficult to navigate it, and how you can create your own process for success. So we can break the graduate school journey, I think, into 3 parts. There's deciding, then there's madly applying, both for funding and to programs. And then once you get in, you've got to find a way to triumph, and triumphing in graduate school really is not easy. So the first step is deciding to go. And in order to decide to go, you need to know yourself and your potential. You must know who you are, and then you also must know your skills and talents that you possess that will make you the most successful graduate student. And then after you decide to go, then you have to apply. And apply, I think the slides are paused, Nicolette. Yeah. Yep, there we go. After you decide to go, then you've got to apply. And applying really requires you to promote your best self. So you have to really celebrate your own achievements and then sort of reframe any failures or struggles you've had as battles that you've won that led to your achievements. And that can't always be easy. And then finally, once you get in, you have to find a way to succeed. Triumphing in graduate school really, I think, requires you to be strategic, methodical, and purpose-centered. You really have to know how to use your resources and the people around you. And then So I guess now that we know a bit of what the journey looks like, you might be wondering at this point, why is it so difficult to navigate this journey? This is kind of a complex question, and I only have a couple of minutes left, but there are 3 key reasons why I think it can be difficult. The first is that we don't always take the opportunity to self-reflect, so we may not exactly know why we want to go to graduate school. The second reason is that the application steps can be confusing and hard. And finally, many graduate programs are designed to kind of test you, challenge you, in some cases break you down. So starting with why we don't always take the opportunity to self-reflect and why self-reflection is key is just some of us don't have the time because our basic needs aren't met. Others of us might be afraid of some of the outcomes of self-reflection, but any and all of those reasons are valid, whatever your reason is. The second reason it's difficult to navigate the graduate school journey is that the application steps can kind of be hard and confusing. There are a lot of questions you have to consider, like, what are graduate programs looking for? Do I need to take the GRE? Will I have the funding I might need for this? What does a statement of purpose require? If I'm applying for a PhD or even a master's in some cases, how much research experience is enough? And I think the key is not to let all of this stuff overwhelm you, because there are things out there to help support you. And then my final point on why I think the graduate school journey is hard is just many graduate school programs are designed to break you down. And in part, the idea is that exposing weakness and taking you out of your comfort zone can help you build you into a better researcher or STEM professional. That may not always be true, though. And I guess now that we understand a little bit about why the graduate school journey is difficult, you might be asking, how can I create my own process for success to navigate the graduate school journey? Well, we don't have all day, but I'll briefly tell you how in about the minute or so I've left. You can create your own process by 1, taking time to reflect on who you are and your goals, developing a community who can advocate for you and demystify the graduate school journey, and 3, approaching graduate school strategically and methodically. So starting with self-reflection, there are a lot of different ways you can do this. You can write or record in a journal for 5 to 10 minutes a day. Make a vision board with pictures and illustrations that express your hopes and dreams. Here's a look at mine. And then also by having honest and frequent conversations with the people who know you best. The next thing you can do is develop a community to help support you. And you can do that by using people who are already in your life, by connecting with those who have expertise you need. But I think the most important quality of anyone is just their willingness to provide their time and attention to help you. And lastly, I think you can take a strategic approach to being a graduate student by just sort of remembering who you are during those difficult times, tackling tasks and challenges in chunks. Don't try to do anything all at once. And then developing different coping methods to help you prepare. And I guess in conclusion, I just want to say that if you have a process, then I promise you won't need a genie or a magic wish to help you navigate graduate school. So thanks.
Thank you, Naeem. Now I invite folks to ask Naeem 2 questions, and feel free to ask it verbally or through the chat box.
What tips do I have for applying? I would say apply in waves. So tackle the schools maybe you might care about most, or also the schools who have deadlines first in that first wave, then break it up into smaller waves sort of thereafter. You really want to break it up because you like to be able to devote as much of your attention as possible to tailoring your application to the school that you're interested in, to the program you're interested in making it very specific about why that program. Okay, could I share why the White House icon was on my self-reflection board? Well, one of the goals of my life is to hopefully one day be the U.S. Secretary of Energy. So I would like to at some point work in the White House as well. So that is why that's there.
That's awesome. Any other questions for Naeem? We can take one more if there is one.
This is only sort of sarcastic, but how many spreadsheets did you make?
I had one very large spreadsheet with a lot of tabs, like I think 10 or so tabs.
That is great. Engineers do love spreadsheets also, so that's great. Okay, we're gonna move along to our next panel presentation. We have Natalie. She is a Doctor of Medicine candidate at the University of Vermont. Are you ready to begin your presentation, Natalie?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie, she, her pronouns. I'm a first year medical student. I moved here 2 months ago, so I'm going to try to be brief about kind of that process because I think what a lot of people ask me about is really like, how do you get there? What can I do to make myself stand out? I think the first thing is to know what you're getting yourself into. So being a physician, you are in charge of making a diagnosis and a treatment plan, and really you're going to learn so much about the pathology of all of these diseases that you're going to love science. But that's not to say that all people in this field, all they do is sit inside and study and have no life, because I think it's really important that you find the things that you love to do and that the things that make you happy, because you'll be a better person and a better professional at the end of the day. So I'm actually from Oregon. My out-of-state journey began about 5 years ago. I went to Colorado for college, and I'm gonna now just explain some things that I think might help you in the application process. So the first thing I did is I got a job. I think any source of income in college is important, but I got a job in a field, in the STEM-related field, so I think it was applicable to my interests. Leadership is also really important, so that's kind of the next thing. This is a really standard form of leadership at CSU, being a RAM welcome leader, but it really just shows that you can be responsible, and that people can put trust in you to do something. And the next thing is research. You know, it's not a requirement for med school, but I found I was really passionate about it, and I think it does help in the long run. This was just a summer program I did, but really all of these things that I'm talking about, you know, whatever, you know, you need to find things that you're going to be able to talk about in the interview process. Speaking of which, they are going to ask you about your hobbies, and they're going to ask you about what makes you a normal person. So don't forget about those. You know, do things that you love. Great stress relievers. Another thing is volunteering and community service. I was in an awesome organization in college where I had a lot of opportunities in and around CSU to do those things. And I think, you know, finding an organization and sticking with it. I did take on some leadership roles, and I think that just really showed that I have a commitment to this organization, and that showed that I can make a commitment as a professional in the future. Some of the other things is, again, back on the research thing, really, I got a lot of publications out of it, so I think it did help. And, you know, it was something that was intellectually stimulating, that I could do in my free time, which I also think was helpful. I was part of alternative spring breaks, so I think taking initiative as an undergrad is really important. We started a program in rural healthcare, so we went down to Alamosa, and we kind of learned a lot about the healthcare system, and also did some community service work, because in rural health, you know, the community is really interconnected with the healthcare system. And that also really increased my interest in medicine in general too. Eventually I graduated, and I did take a year off. So this is called a gap year. It's a year off in between going to medical school. And I spent my gap year actually doing all the application process and applying. So that was last year. I took the MCAT twice. I'm putting this on here to let you know that, you know, success doesn't come without failures, and it's okay to not do what you wanted to do the first time. You know, it's how you pick yourself up, and you know, it's how your resilience shines, and how you deal with that. I did a lot of clinical stuff during my gap year as well. Really nice not to be in school, and to be able to get that clinical experience. And I also continued doing research, and you know, just had some fun along the way. I applied to over 20 schools, and that sounds like a lot for y'all, but it's actually I mean, 15 to 20 is a pretty normal thing for medical schools. I interviewed at 6 of them. So that's the odds right there, 6 out of 20. And I got accepted to 3 or 4, I can't even remember now. But I ended up choosing a school that gave me all the opportunities I wanted to do. I think you'll learn the curriculum anywhere you go, but I wanted to be in a place that when I'm not in school, I'm still happy, and I'm still able to enjoy my life because it's not all about school. So for me, location was really important. Vermont is gorgeous and it has a lot of parallels to Colorado and Oregon. And so I got to do a lot of those things that I really enjoy doing. So yeah, sorry, that was a lot of talking.
Thank you, Natalie. Now I invite folks to ask her 2 questions, either through the chat box or verbally. I have a question. Oh, you can go. I thought I heard somebody.
So, well, yeah, and this isn't directly related to graduate, but kind of. Well, I'm just curious what drew you to medicine? It's a really hard field, and yeah, and that's great. You know, we need more STEM females.
Yeah, so I think the typical answer is you want to help people and you're interested in science, but honestly, there's like any of these professions can do that. You know, you can help people in any of these STEM professions, and they're all wonderful, wonderful things. For me, it was really just like I said, that idea of like diagnosing and kind of problem solving and knowing the pathology of these things like through and through. Like we're learning some like a lot of what we learned in undergrad, but just so much more in depth. You know, it's like all there, and I'm really fulfilled in that I can learn like all of this, and you know, it's like almost answering all these questions that I have about the world and science. So that's a really cool idea. I don't know if that answered the question, but
And then I had a question about how did you manage applying to 20 different schools? Because I know you said it's not a lot, but I feel like that's a lot. So if you have any like advice or like insight of how to manage and how you like navigated through that great amount of applications, I think that would be great to share.
yeah, I don't know how it is for y'all, but for med school, there's one application actually, and you just add schools to the one application. So I did have to fill out like 20 different secondary applications. So you do the first application, and then there's a secondary application where they ask you like paragraphs and kind of essays, and so I did have to do 20 of those. But I think for me it was just that being in my gap year, so not being in school while I was applying, was awesome because I didn't have homework, I didn't have exams, I didn't have to study for things. I just had to work, and I came home at the end of the day and was like, gonna work on my application. So for that reason, I'm a huge fan of gap years, and you know, people who don't go straight in, like you don't have to. You know, you can take a year off, and really for me, it was about finding myself, kind of what Chris was talking about. So yeah.
Thank you. And I thought of another question, but if folks have questions, like please like share them. But I'm curious to see like how was like your study strategy for just preparing to take the MCAT?
Yeah, so the first time I did a lot of reading on Reddit and websites that, you know, like trying to figure out what to do. So I used someone else's study schedule, and I thought I had to do all these different things. Didn't end up getting the score I wanted the first time. And the second time, you know, I think it was just getting over that test hurdle of, okay, I've done this before, like I'm gonna switch up my study strategy. I only studied for like a couple months the second time, and I just like made sure I was really focused because I was very easily distracted by roommates, you know, other people. Put my phone away and just like sat down and studied. And I think the first time I also overstudied because I studied for like 3 months, and it was like definitely the burnout was real. So trying to find like your maximal point of knowledge and taking it, lots of practice tests.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Natalie? Okay, awesome. We're gonna move on to our final panel presentation, and we have Tony. She is a Master's of Science in Education candidate at the University of Pennsylvania. Tony, are you ready to start your presentation?
I think I'm ready. Can y'all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna advance to your first slide.
Well, hello everyone. I am Tony Dunlap, and I'm really thankful to Nicolette and also to the entire team for the opportunity to even be here today. I currently teach middle and high school level computer science. I have experience teaching 7th through 12th grade, and I'm currently in master's program of education. And if you were to ask me, how in the world did I end up in graduate school around this time of year last year, I would have had no idea. And I think the quote that I have here on the right side it really speaks to me in terms of when something's truly meant for you, it will happen, because this opportunity just basically landed in my lap. Just a little bit of background about me. And the reason why I'm providing this background is because maybe you'll see pieces of you in this story. But I come from Georgia, not too far away from where our first panelist was from, currently in school in Texas. And my experience, though, is a little bit unorthodox in some ways. Went to public school, but I also have experience in an online public school called Georgia Cyber Academy. And little did I know, being a graduate from an online school would pave the way for the way I think about education. While I was in online school, I also had the opportunity to do dual enrollment programs at Clayton State, which is a school in Georgia. And boy, oh boy, did I not know I was in for a lot of fun, but I also had a really steep learning curve when I was there. And so I was a student who loved math and science, but I had no idea that going into that next level, that phase in college, that I would learn truly what it means to fail and bounce back from it and eventually succeed. So I learned a lot during that time frame about how, depending on where you come from and where your school is, where it's located and what you're exposed to, can really impact the way that you experience your collegiate journey. So I had to learn how to trust myself and learn really what it means to work hard, which all of you probably know is a prereq for being in the STEM fields. But fast forward, I was able to graduate. I was able to be exposed to a lot, but actually no engineering or computer science at the time. I was exposed to mainly the math and sciences, and I knew that that was what I was good at. And I had a lot of, interest at the time in high school, which was also what got me on the graduation stage, doing things such as student council and working on our newsletter team, doing also animation for our cartoon series. But I had no idea that this would leave me with this question of what I would even do leaving high school. I knew I had these interests, knew I liked math and science, but I wasn't quite sure what potential career path to go down until one of my high school guidance counselors recommended engineering and computer science. So they basically recommended that because of my love for these things, and some of you in STEM may be able to relate. But I still didn't quite understand what it fully meant, but I was willing to take a leap of faith and become a computer engineering major at the University of Denver. So I know I'm technically not a part of the Rams family, but I'm pretty close. It was my first experience leaving from home, as some of our panelists have mentioned as well, getting adjusted to leaving and going to different places. So I went through a stage of panic as well when I first moved, not knowing what to expect, not knowing if I could be successful in engineering and computer science, especially being a female and a person of color. I looked around me, I didn't really know whether or not people like me did this sort of thing. But eventually I was able to find my place. I was doing okay at the time in engineering and computer science. I was pulling myself out of my comfort zone, learning more about living in a new place. So all of those things were great, but I didn't know those were preparing me. Every single thing that you see here on the images of the slideshow I put because they were fundamental changing points in my life in terms of exposing myself to new things, learning about circuits, which, fun fact, I had to drop out of circuits twice in my college journey. Got to do internship programs that challenged me. This is an image from one of my internship programs in engineering. And little did I know, what I thought I knew at the time about computer science was very minimal. And I was glad that I got a chance to go to that experience because I learned that I had a lot more failing to do until I really could see that true success. So all along, I thought that I was grooming myself to go straight into industry. I thought that I was grooming myself to be a computer engineer or a computer scientist. But still, all of these non-technical situations, meeting new people, learning more and more about how I love to be a people person who led organizations and I realized more about my creative interests, and it made me question more really what my purpose was at school. I ended up, fast forward to founding the National Society of Black Engineers chapter at my school. And I began wondering more and more as I succeeded and failed and learned more about the field, is it perfect for me to go straight into industry, or should I consider perhaps some other options? Because I loved community organizing and being someone who also could mentor other people based on the fact that I've had so many unique experiences. And I think I've run out of time here, but the whole point is to keep your mind open, because now that I've realized that I've decided to go into education based on my life experiences, it's been the perfect fit. I still get to do STEM, but I also get to work with others as well. But I hope I got all that in. Hopefully that made some sense at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Now I invite folks to ask Tony some questions, either through the chat or verbally.
Hey, hi, Tony. My question is just, what do you find the most challenging and most rewarding about teaching computer science? And how do you relate that back to students?
Okay, you said the most challenging and the most, did you say interesting?
And most rewarding.
Oh, most rewarding. I would say challenging in terms of just the fact it's a lot. In order to know how to educate and how to educate properly, I realized that it's one thing to know about the different academic challenges that people can face, and it's one thing to be a community organizer and work with people, and another to really help students truly learn and see themselves in the work. And I think that leads me to also realizing why it's so rewarding, because I realized that being on this side of STEM in education, you get to shape the next, generation and people who will enter into the world on the workforce, and just also being a face that they see. I like the fact that I am a female and a person of color in computer science, and I realize that has an impact on the students that enroll in my class and their ability to see themselves being successful.
So Tony, I have a question. You talked about your experience with online learning prior to the pandemic. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Was it at Washington, or I'm sorry, I don't remember what school that was at. I guess, and my question specifically is, how does that compare to what we're in now? Like I experienced technology problems earlier and, just navigating through that. And so does that experience help you with what you're doing currently?
Absolutely. And I think that's even the reason why I'm here, because I've seen education from so many different perspectives. I think also that's a big reason as to why I'm fascinated about, the way that we can teach, and thinking about hybrid learning, as we call it now. I feel like me being on the flip side of the coin, being a student who has learned online, has helped me also to teach online. Currently, my school, we are doing both. So I'm currently back to school in person, but those who opt to be remote, I teach them virtually. I think my school did things quite differently than many schools do now, because I think online learning is such a new concept for everyone. But my school in Georgia, they've been at it for a long time. And so they have a lot of different techniques. I just don't know if I have enough time to share, but definitely that has helped a lot with my experience. I hope that answers your question in some way. Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, is she talking?
Yeah, my mute was on. Could you share one of the techniques that you really enjoyed?
I think what was most interesting for my experience is that we didn't have a webcam requirement at school. Even though we had live classes with our teachers and our classmates, it was interesting how that wasn't necessarily a practice. And because we weren't in a pandemic, it was nothing for us to also have social outings and club meetings in person, which I think is kind of different because nowadays we physically cannot do certain things. But it was very great how we were able to simultaneously work at our own pace when we weren't in our live meetings, and also meet with our teachers and kind of have a personalized experience. Classes were not 8 to 3 every single day. It was more spaced out, which really worked well. And so I was able to have a pretty traditional experience in the end. Like, we even had prom, just like a regular school would. All the other pieces were there. It was virtual most of the time.
Awesome. And now we're going to open it up to questions for everybody. And I believe that I think it's just us, like the panelists, and then me and Tanya, but I still want us to like ask questions because I still got questions for y'all. What? I'm curious, and it'll help our students. So I have one for Tony. I'm just like wondering like how you like mentally and emotionally like process like all of these changing parts of like where you got to today, because I know some students are really like structured and they can't, it's hard for them to like deal with going with the flow. So I'm just like curious to see like how you did that, and if you have any insight for like those that have a hard time going with the flow and like finding themselves.
I'm actually really glad you asked me that, because I was sitting listening to Naeem talk about how you have to have a process. And I was like, oh man, I wonder where I could have been if I had really had a true process. I think I'm still trying to also navigate even still. I think what gave me a lot of peace was senior year, when I was thinking about, my potential options. I was glad to have the, I guess, the mentorship of our equity in STEM program at University of Denver. And by me having the experience working with underrepresented communities in STEM and working with National Society of Black Engineers, there was a conversation about potential options. And so I think that was helpful in terms of me realizing that a decision that we make, and this probably applies to everyone, you can relate to this, we're not stuck to that for life. And so once I realized that I had flexibility and there's no real true, I think failure is just a concept, it's not a reality. As long as you keep pushing and trying to find what works for you, eventually you will succeed. So I think by me having that mentorship, it helped. And the opportunity kind of just came to me by me finding out about it and everything just working out so well. I just had a peace about it. But I don't know if that's much help, because I feel like everyone, you'll eventually know, you'll find that inner peace when you found something good.
Yeah, that definitely helps. And if anybody has like anything else they would like to add to that or share, I would definitely appreciate hearing it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'll just echo. I just want to echo, I guess, one particular point, which really is just the flexibility piece, because and just like how important that can be. Because like, I guess at least for me, right? Like, I mean, I thought from like literally like sophomore year of high school that I was gonna be a therapist someday, and that's what I was doing, and so like that was like my initial motivation for doing psychology, and like learning specifically about like mental health, and so I guess the flexibility just is important, because like while mental health is very much still, I'm trying to have it be my focus. But as I've learned, it's lagging very far behind in public health. You probably already intuitively know that to some extent, just from exist and going through the systems and institutions we have right now. But yeah, it's severely lacking. But anyway, just recognizing that you don't have to stick to the path that you think you need to if it doesn't feel right. And in that way too, I guess also just like, I guess I'm a very big proponent of like, trust your gut, because, you know, like pros and con lists, great, obviously. You know, if you need to use that very analytical mindset, very helpful. But I guess for me, at least in terms of making some of like the biggest decisions I've made throughout my life, I always try to pay attention to like, does this actually feel right? Like, does this actually sit right for me? So.
That's great. I wanted to circle on the point Tony made too. I get about that flexibility. I think an important part of um, going to graduate school is also having like that willingness to pivot. I think I came in thinking like, oh, hey, I'm going to get this tough degree in electrical and computer engineering, and then I'm going to go out and do like hard engineering the rest of my life. And that's not at all what I discovered I wanted to do. Like shortly through my first year, I started getting involved in public policy classes and really got attracted to the idea of like what role scientists and engineers can play in developing and shaping policy. So yeah, I think you have to be able to like recognize the signs as they come and different opportunities available to you. So just want to say that was a really good point.
Does anybody have any other questions that we have for each other or anything to add?
I was curious to know from the others here how you, because I know some of you mentioned about having that balance by not work not being all that you do. But what are some tips do you guys have to make sure that you know that you're getting that right type of balance between your studies, work, and just what you want to do?
I would say the biggest thing for me is having other people remind me. So one of the people that reminds me on the regular basis is Nicolette. um, to yeah, to take that break and to find that balance. I also get it from parents and my roommate all the time. So yeah, I would say other people are a big help for me in just reminding me.
I totally agree with that. I also think like making a schedule, so like knowing like this is dedicated study time like here, and this is dedicated Natalie time here. Like this is dedicated I'm gonna make dinner time here. Like, you know, scheduling is important, time management is important.
I think we have time for one more question. I didn't realize the session ends at 3:55. I thought it ended at 3:50, so my bad. But we have time for one more question if anybody has anything they would like to ask or add to the conversation that we're having. Okay, well, thank you all so much for taking the time and energy to do this today. I greatly appreciate it. And it means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to our students. I do apologize that we didn't have a lot of students, but since this is recorded, it will go out to our students, and we did have around 100 people register, so it'll impact them, just not today. So thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.